I don't know if everybody here has heard, but I know that, I'm just interested in, I'm interested in the generational conversation that you have in the exhibition upstairs, starting with the kind of your discovery of the work and how you feel like it relates to your work.
Well, I think it sort of starting from the very beginning, it comes out from, it actually started with teaching at the Art Academy in various small positions over several numbers of years, and also with the other artists that I work with a lot, making a fanzine, Elise Storsven. And she was also starting to teach, and there was this frustration about things that we wanted to share with our students that we didn't necessarily know how to let them know about. Things we remembered from we were children and young adults, seeing around in the art scene in Oslo, and trying to look for that. And then in 2012, we started this great conversation and work with Kunsthall Oslo for this exhibition that became Hold stenhårt fast på greia di, the art and feminism in Norway, and which became a really great collaboration with them. Yes, so out of that started that conversation. So it started out as actually a want of introducing these young people who was sort of coming onto the scene to the fact that there were people who much older than them, and not what they were sort of looking up, not necessarily things that they saw as things they wanted to become, or there was outside of what they were looking at, that was actually in conversation with what they were doing, and the importance of that.
I always think that one of the best moments for an exhibition is when you feel like you're seeing younger artists do something that has clear historical references, and they're often not aware of them. Not that it's an oversight, but just that it's so much a part of the visual culture, but to point out the roots of that, I think is really interesting.
Yes, and also it's sort of a great moment also to see what is not yet being reinvestigated, I think, sort of in the exhibitions that are around. Somehow it's like if you hang out a lot with young art students, you could actually use that as a great way of like figuring out what you should make exhibitions about in the next couple of years, because there is some type of need that, because that is the wonderful thing about young people. They have a certain type of like sixth sense about things that is necessary and need to come into focus again.
It's true. The other thing that I always think is a good indicator of a good historical show is when I think I know something about something, and then I realize I know like one photograph, like one historical photograph that's famous of one event, and I realize that if I probably only know one photograph, most of people who think they know this stuff probably only know one photograph. So those are always my two triggers, is when you see it in younger people's work and when you think you know more about it than you actually do.
Yeah. And also this is also, as soon as you start looking and doing research, as we just started doing research for this show, of course then it becomes an education for yourself in sort of looking into all these different things. And then of course then looking at artists' work that are the generation older than me, all of a sudden it started building all these bridges about, in terms of also making me even more aware of whose shoulders I'm standing on, and the kind of groundwork that was laid down by the women that came before me in terms of what kind of doors that they had to break down and the kind of difficulties that they were facing and what I've learned from it, and sort of really look closely at that.
And did unearthing series work make you look at your work differently?
Yes, I think not in terms of the work itself. I think that is sort of yet to come a little bit. But I think the conversation that I have had with Siri has been a lot about what it means to be an artist and the process, like the sort of life project of being an artist, and this type of all the work that doesn't necessarily show in the end in an exhibition, but that is so much part of an artist's life, and like how you deal with all the different types of of problems and all the different kind of possibilities, and how do you actually make things that is life happening to you also become part of the choices that help you move forward. And that is also part of that conversation, very much about being female, I think, and sort of moving on in a male-dominated world.
Do you see a relationship between the two shows, the conceptual show and this show, beyond the sort of historical coincidence?
Yes, I only the conceptual show I only went briefly through in the opening. So it looks like a wonderful show, and I'm really looking forward to go back and look, because there's a lot of work there that I have never seen before. But it's very welcoming. It kind of showed that you've been longing to see that actually you can come in and spend a couple of days just really getting an education.
Exactly.
It's wonderful. So I'm very excited about it.
It's a great coincidence. I mean, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but that the two shows are happening at the same time. It's just, it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for younger people to really get a sense of the history, which is nice.
Yes.
So, what do you see? This is a question my boss always asks me, which I hate. What for you would make this? What's success of this exhibition? What would that look like? What would you like to come out of this?
I think the goal all along the way has been to reintroduce Siri into what we think of as Norwegian art history, and I think I'm sort of upping that wish slightly, and now I'm just saying art history.
Yes.
But because that was my surprise when I first actually saw, because I did see her work for the first time in a very small photograph, and it was just a little detail of the installation that was in this building in 1969. And I think when I saw that image, and this is while we're doing research for the feminist show, then I saw the image and I saw her name and realized that it was a female artist, and I looked at what it looked like, and there was this huge surprise. I was kind of shocked that I had never seen it before.
Yep.
That I hadn't heard about it, that it hadn't been, something that everybody was whispering about. Oh my God, it was this incredible installation, and it's this local artist, and it was in Oslo, and it happened here.
It's shocking.
And it was really shocking to me, because I was like, how could something that amazing have happened, in my hometown, and I wouldn't know. And it was a woman artist, and I specifically have been looking for women artists as a student and as a young artist to learn from.
Why? I mean, do you have any thoughts about why it went sort of underground and is not so known? Well,
I think this also is a question that's tied up to biography and things that happened in Siri's life. And so the things that, as I'm getting to know her and know about her history, the thing that I have been concerned with, and also the reason that I have sort of gone to the steps of actually getting so involved with her work, is that I thought it was really disastrous that when that good an artist or artwork that's that good, and that when the artist no longer is able to carry it by themselves, that there is no structure that feels responsible to make sure that it comes along with the future history.
And it's really hard. We were talking a little bit last night when we were walking through the show about that Siri herself doesn't necessarily offer a historical context. It's not like, oh, it's like this. It's what art historians or curators automatically do, which I think annoys artists sometimes, understandably, is sort of play that game of like, so who do you look at, or who do you think your work is like, or so it's this automatic attempt to kind of understand, and that's in a way sort of the beginning step of canonizing somebody, right? Is to sort of try and figure out where they function in relationship to the history. The current canon, and the canon, by the way, in my opinion, is always shifting and always changing and always site-specific and time-specific. But it's interesting when an artist like Judah Scott in some ways doesn't participate in that, it makes it even harder. And it makes it easier at the same time for the work to be sort of forgotten because there's no sort of angle in which you can grab it easily.
Yes, and I also think, I mean, being from, this having always been a very small arts community too, so that also is part of it, I guess, because to be able to have some type of direction there, it's also the need of excluding somebody to make another voice being heard, right? So it's always a question between these two things. But I also think, and I guess, it's easy to, in comparison to a lot of the other artists at the same time, which was very explicitly political, to read her Siri's work as being foremost formal. But I think that is also a very important thing to sort of look at it, and look at it as, I find it to have some really deeply political connotations in that work, and just from where she's speaking from, and how she presents the work and how she thinks about it, and I also want that to be discussed.
I think it's very retroactively, maybe not at the time, but it strikes me as very pointed and very political to install that piece in a children's playground. I mean, to take a minimalist sort of formal work and to shift it in that way is quite a striking gesture.
Yeah, and maybe foremost because she doesn't necessarily differentiate. The work doesn't change as she's moving it into a playground. Or it doesn't change again when it goes back into the museum. And I think this is a really important part in how she thinks about artwork and how she thinks about audiences and the community.
That seems really important. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Who here saw the piece? Anybody see the piece when it was originally installed?
In '69?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the difference, or what you remember it was like, or how it strikes you now. I'm putting you on the spot, I realize, but.
We have a microphone that you are welcome to talk into, if you dare. Well, you're very welcome. I'll hand it to Geir while I'm walking.
So no questions to the panel, just to the audience. If anyone wants to share their experience, they can also do that in Norwegian if you feel the pressure of English too much.
You'd be helping the art historians.
We can talk about it later too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one, Elisabeth?
Yeah.
Nei, altså, kan jeg snakke på norsk?
Ja, ja.
For jeg husker jo så godt første gangen da vi så det på huset, og det som forskjellen fra den gangen og til nå jo at materialiteten var mye røffere i den første versjonen. Og nå går jeg på en måte og venter på at noen skal tørre å gå og skrive på den som der oppe, og gjøre den litt stiv. Jeg får litt sånn action på den.
And she was saying that it's so much more. It looks more beautiful. It was rougher back then, and the materials was much rougher, and that she's waiting for somebody to go back and write on it again to sort of bring it back down
the
to
writing.
Yeah.
That was Elisabeth Hort speaking. My name is Lars Elton. I'm an art critic, and I saw the photographs of the original installation, and it strikes me as Elisabeth says that it was much rougher then, and it was sort of a happening also because at the opening and during the days and weeks after, people came and wrote their messages and they painted on it, and for instance it said art wages for all citizens. And Eline can tell much more about that, but I found it very striking that now it has become an aesthetic piece, but back then it was an activist piece.
It's interesting because it's so aesthetic. It's beautiful.
Well, I think it came up in she has done it in many different versions, and so we have had a long debate back and forth if that sort of performative thing about writing on it should happen again. And Siri wanted it not to be written on this time. And I thought it was also important that it can be shown in many different ways, that it isn't one way that it needs to be shown, and that is a possibility. It's always a possibility, and it can be made up in different ways. It's interesting, this thing about how it looks right now, because there were because she's working with industrial materials, there's certain aspects that one doesn't control, and that comes with the material. So there's other changes, that the diameter of the tubes were 14% smaller this time than last time. And also the colors of the piece. Last time they were done, the colors were a sort of gray, yellow, and they were less translucent. And we didn't know this before the actually tubes came off the truck with the crane. Then we looked up and I was like, ooh, it's pink, and ooh, it's light green, and this, so that this sort of came with the material. So we've been talking back and forth about these things, Syria and I, and there's something about that was interesting about it, that the time that this piece was able to sort of hold also on to the time that's now. The piece was then, but it's also now, and it will always be new. Whenever you build it up, it will be new, and it will be part of the time that it's living in. And yeah, let's see if somebody will write on it.
That's for you guys.
But also there was one more point about it too that I thought was important, and that is about the fact that the act that Siri does about bringing sculpture down from the pedestal. We have to sort of remember what time it's made in, and the way that the importance of what sort of defines an artwork, and sort of bringing sculpture down from the pedestal, opening it up as a social arena, inviting people inside the sculpture. Like somehow all the political statements or the speaker's corner that sort of the sculpture becomes with the writing has a tendency to overshadow the really important aspects of what she does with the sculpture. And so I wanted, it was important in this discussion to also talk about it now, after all these years. The first time when she showed it in 1969, it had never been shown outdoors before. So that was also important. Tagging on something was also much more radical, I would think, than doing that in an art context today. And I thought now it has been shown and placed outdoors, and it has been standing there sort of neglected for a long time and in the end being discarded. And maybe now is also time to make an argument to reintroduce it into maybe hopefully a museum, It's like this is also an art object. It's not just something that's left in the street to be somebody else's billboard either. It can also be this other thing.
So that's a hint to the museums in the room.
Yeah, all of them.
All of them.
Brooklyn, Norway.
I'm going to have to cut off and go for a break, but I think it's important to notice who is on stage as well. It's an institutional curator from the Sackler Foundation at the Brooklyn Museum of Art and an artist who are working both on the same type of area. So we don't have a Sackler Foundation in Norway. Maybe we should have somebody who's devoted to this type of work and the historization of it. We could discuss this for hours. So I'm sorry we only had 15 minutes for it. We have a 10-minute break. I'll introduce the next bulk when we get back. So please be back here at around 15 minutes past 3. There's coffee and water outside, and you can hopefully catch some fresh air as well. Thank you so much.